Good afternoon, everybody. That's very nice. So we have the next 25 minutes together. And I promise you right now, it'll seem much longer. Actually, I ought to tell you this story. The last course I ever taught at Teachers College, I got back a student evaluation that said, if I had 20 minutes left to live, I would want to spend them in Arthur Levine's class. Because every minute with Arthur Levine feels like an hour. So by those standards, we got a day together, okay? So let's talk about the future of higher education. The United States is undergoing a transformation. We're moving from a national, analog, industrial economy to a global digital information economy. And one of the problems we have is that all of our social institutions, whether it's universities or schools or government or healthcare or media, were all created for the former. So they don't work as well as they once did. And they all appear to be broken. They need to be refitted for a new world. So let me ask 3 questions today, or at least we're going to talk about 3 questions today. And one of those questions is, first, is higher education broken? Second, if it is, what needs to happen? Does it need to be repaired? Or does it need to be replaced? Repair is what happens in the not-for-profit sector. Replace is what happens in the for-profit sector. How will change occur? Will it be by adaptation, the current model adapting to new circumstances, or will it be by disruption? Okay, so the answers to those questions are as follows. And then we can do questions and answers. It depends upon who you ask. If you ask people in the academy, traditional colleges and universities, for the most part what they say is, look, the existing model of higher education is going to be sustained. They base in the belief that higher education is continually remodeling itself, reinventing itself, new courses, new programs, new faculty. They hold that higher education will adapt to current societal change as it adapted to all the changes in the past. What it'll do is it'll reform, it'll renovate, it'll augment. The higher education sociologist, Stephen Brint, just described the current era as the golden age of higher education. Now, if you ask people in the post-secondary sector, non-traditional institutions, non-mainstream organizations, and you ask, what do you think is going to happen? And what they tend to say is, they see a real break with the past. They think higher education is outdated and dysfunctional, and it's going to require a fundamental remaking. Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School said by 2030, half of all colleges and universities in the United States, including publics, will be bankrupt. So, choose whichever one you like. Whatever makes you feel good, depends on where you work, choose that one. Look, both scenarios tend to be presented with passion, and to some extent they're both compelling. They're plausible. But both of them require a leap of faith. So let's do this a different way today. Let's look at the forces that are going to have the largest impact on higher education in the years to come, and what impact they're likely to have on colleges and universities. What will they require that colleges and universities do? The 3 forces I want to look at are demography, the economy, and technology. Okay, demography. The United States is changing color, it's moving, it's aging, it's coming from abroad. Color. The United States has historically been a majority white nation. By 2045, whites will be a minority. By 2060, the white population and Latino population will differ by only 2 percentage points. Right now, California, Florida, New Mexico, and Texas are minority and majority states. New York, New Jersey are right behind. 10 cities in 9 states are majority black. 28 cities in 4 states are majority Latino. 1 state's approaching majority Asian. So bottom line. Oh, Dayton, Ohio. Honolulu. Okay. Bottom line, the fastest growing populations in the country are those with which higher education has been least successful. And what it means is issues that have been important will become much more important in the years ahead. Access, graduation, cost, debt, accountability. But the reality is none of those things require a transformation in higher education. All of those can be dealt with by adaptation. Let's go on to moving. Okay? In 1960, a majority of Americans lived in the Northeast and the Midwest. Today, 38% do. However, 45% of our colleges and 55% of our private colleges are in those regions. So we have too much higher education in the Northeast and Midwest, given population, and too little higher education in the West and the South. We've started seeing closures, and we've started seeing mergers, particularly in the Northeast and the Midwest. And those are likely to increase in number. The one thing that's also likely to happen, as we see the number of institutions form parity with the populations that live in those regions, the institutions that survive are far more likely to be healthy than the mix we have now. What I'd also say is that what we're going to see is, in terms of innovation and change, we're probably going to see a lot of innovation and change in troubled colleges. But they're going to be aimed at survival. The real change at scale is likely to be in the West and the South. California is creating a virtual community college, which is one of the most interesting experiments going on in the country right now. We're going to see experiments designed to accommodate more and more students carried out in population-rich areas that are going to provide models or at least examples for the rest of the country. So what's this mean? What it means for the most part is we're going to see a little bit of disruption, perhaps, in the West and the South. But throughout the rest of the country, the predominant pattern is really going to be adaptation. Nothing profound needs to change. Aging. In 1960, 13% of the population was 65 or older. 39% was 18 or younger. By 2035, for the first time in US history, the number of people over 65 will be larger than the number of people under 19. By 2030, all the baby boomers will have reached retirement age. So the problem we're going to have is those groups that have been paying into Social Security, Medicare, and other senior programs are beginning to take that money out rather than contributing. The biggest item in state budgets tend to be social welfare programs and education. What we're really heading to is a generational clash. And we don't have an answer for that one yet. but it's going to be a very serious problem. But there's nothing about it that requires a transformation of higher education. Let's talk about the economy. If you went to sleep in 1947 and you woke up today, you'd be very well rested. But the economic landscape would be nearly unrecognizable. It would be turned upside down. You'd find the great cities, the capitals of industrial America, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Baltimore, to be devastated by deindustrialization and struggling to reinvent themselves in a region now called the Rust Belt. You'd learn that small, western, provincial towns, when you went to bed, Seattle, San Jose, Austin, and Portland, were inventing a new American economy, and their population now totaled more than 8 million. You'd find that the number of jobs in the industrial sector had crashed, and the number of jobs in what was then a small knowledge sector had boomed. And the requirements for getting those jobs had changed too. One of the things that really accelerated all of this was the recession. And what happened during the recession was, I can't wait to find out. Okay. Was at the depth of the recession in 2009, we had lost 7.2 million jobs. By 2016, 11.6 million new jobs had been created. They were very different jobs. 73% of those jobs required a baccalaureate degree. 98% required some post-secondary education. Of the 5.6 million people who had jobs with high school diplomas or less, only 80,000 of those jobs have come back. 80,000 out of 5.6 million. So what it means is, for people with less than a post-secondary education, there hasn't been a recovery. And during the recession, people with graduate degrees actually gained jobs. So where are we? It's clear people need more education. They also need higher level skills. And they need different kinds of skills. And sometimes we call them 21st century skills. Sometimes we call them soft skills. What they really amount to is general education for this century. What they really amount to is the new liberal arts. They fall into two baskets. Basket number one are those skills that are essential to succeed in a time of change, including critical thinking, creativity, continuous learning, crap detecting, problem solving, flexibility, adaptability, and the like. In the other basket, we have a whole bunch of specific areas tied to the changes that are occurring in the country. We want people to learn technology and media literacy skills. Yeah, we're moving from an analog to a digital society. We want them to learn cross-cultural competence, which is rooted both in our increasing population diversity and globalization. We want them to learn knowledge literacy and data management. If you live in an information economy, that's real important stuff. And we want them to learn about teamwork, collaboration, and communication competencies. And you really need those in knowledge workplaces that are becoming very horizontal and not so much vertical. So the bottom line, in terms of the economy, Americans need more education, higher levels than ever before in history. For the first time, there are more college graduates than high school graduates in the workforce. This is translating in demands by policymakers and employers for greater high school graduation rates, increased college attendance rates, increased completion. At the same time, states are driving up high school graduation standards, though student college readiness having increased is not yet apparent. The reality for these changes, they do not demand anything more than adaptation on the part of higher education. Let's talk about technology. So I was writing a book about college students. It was the millennials, and we were doing focus group interviews, and we were doing surveys. And in one focus group interview, I asked a group of students, how are you doing with this deluge of new technologies that are coming at us? And they looked at me entirely perplexed. And one young man gave me what I thought of as a very wise-ass answer, which I subsequently realized was brilliant. He said, it's not technology unless it happens after you're born. So you would probably think it was odd of me to ask you how you were doing with that television in your house. You have a light bulb, right? A car? They were just there. And for these kids, for kids who are in college now, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Netflix already existed before they were born. For kids in middle school, they were born after Facebook, Spotify, and Twitter. A friend's young daughter asked him about his home computer when he was growing up, and he said, I didn't have one. And she said, then how did you get on the internet? The internet was always there. Mobile devices and social media have been there throughout their lives. It's what it means to be a digital native. One problem we face, and almost every college in the country faces it, is that we have digital natives being taught by digital immigrants in analog institutions. They live in entirely different worlds, but that's another talk. The Industrial Revolution occurred in two phases. The first, beginning in the early 19th century, was built on iron and powered by steam. The second, starting in the late 19th century, was created of steel and driven by petroleum. Today's technological revolution is likely to have two phases as well for higher education. The first is being driven by the internet and mobile devices. And the second will be driven by big data, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality. Now, the first phase, internet and mobile devices. Colleges are adopting somewhat slowly, spasmodically, but they're adopting and they're adapting. 30% of all college students have taken an online course. We have MOOCs. We have OPMs that are creating online programs for colleges. We have partnerships like Kaplan and Purdue. We have a lot of stuff happening. But the second phase, big data, AI, and VR, are going to produce profound changes. What they're going to do is permit the rise of customized education, the end of time and credit-based education, new credentials. Not all that long ago, I was riding on an airplane. And I finished the work I brought with me. And I finished the book I was reading. And I turned to the airline magazine in desperation. And there was an article on the travel agency of the future. And it said, it's more than just websites. They'll take you to where you're going. You can walk around in it. You can feel the sand. You can see the restaurant. You can see how tiny your room really is and how far you have to bend your head to see the beach. All that. If we can do that now, why can't we also create 5th century Athens? Why can't we also create France on the eve of the Revolution, or the United States at the time of the Declaration of Independence, or a gazillion things that happened before all of those things in Asia? If we can create that, imagine if we can create 15th century Paris, and our students could actually walk around it. They could step on the cobblestones. They could smell the smells, which had to have been putrid. There was no sewer system. But in any case, how does a stand-up lecture on 15th century Paris compare to that? We're heading to this world. I visited Google. They put me on the roof of a skyscraper. And they told me I was standing on ground as flat as this. And they told me, take the next step. I was in the edge of a skyscraper. Intellectually, I knew nothing could happen to me. I couldn't do it. We're about to create new worlds. And the other thing we have to ask ourselves is, California creates a virtual college. Today, under 20% of all college students are 18 to 22, full-time and residential. What that means is, right now, we can offer a class here. I can take it in New York. Another student can take it in Shanghai. I can sort of nudge that student and say, you know, I missed what the professor said. Into Chinese, back into English. You know, the professor can ask me and my Chinese colleague to prepare a project for the next class. I can ask my Chinese colleague to have tea with me after class. Given that a majority of today's college students, older adults, are only coming to campus to take courses, they're not using services, they're not taking extracurricular activities, they're just taking courses. Why do they need a physical plant called a college? And that's going to be a very large question for us as we move into the future, particularly in those states that have too many students and not enough campuses. Now, one of the things that students will experience the need for lifelong education. Half-life of knowledge is getting shorter. With applied AI and automation, I read about the factory of the future. They said it'd be a worker, a bunch of machines, and a dog. And the dog would be there to make sure the worker didn't touch any of the machines. 80% of all job loss in the United States is due to automation. Oh boy, not to movement to other countries. Today it's spreading beyond low-skilled jobs requiring high school diploma or less. And what the research shows is that if you look at people's jobs today, McKinsey did a study, 53% of typical job is routine work that can be automated. That includes cashiers, clerical support, administrative assistants, as well as doctors, lawyers, and journalists. So here's what we know. Some industries and occupations are likely to be automated out of existence. In 29 states, the most common job is being a truck driver. Second, most Americans see minor to major changes in their jobs, owing to partial automation and the degree to which their jobs are routine. Third, even in industries that are unlikely to be affected materially by automation, because we're producing quintillions of data bytes a day, what's going to happen is we're going to need lifelong upskilling and reskilling, which will require a very different kind of education than colleges have historically provided. But we're going to see a shift in. Historically, we provided just-in-case education. We'll give you 2 years, We'll give you 4 years. Gen Ed, a major, just in case you need it. What we're going to see is a demand for just-in-time education. By next Thursday, teach me a new language. And given the demand and the degree of change, if I had to guess, it's going to produce a larger demand for higher education than current student enrollments. It's far going to overshadow it. And it's going to be revolutionary to this extent. It varies widely in content and duration, anything from a few hours to several years. It ignores established time standards, uniform course lengths, traditional credit measures. It deliberately and intentionally champions variation. Just-in-time education is a non-clock-based academic accounting system. It's rooted in outcomes that students want to achieve rather than the duration of time they spent learning them. Given that just-in-time education isn't going to lead to traditional degrees in most cases, we're going to need new kinds of certifications, micro-credentials, badges, and we're going to need a new kind of transcript that records all the competencies we have achieved in the course of our lifespans. The providers could be colleges and universities. Doesn't have to be. Could be for-profits, could be not-for-profits. The museum down the block from me offers a doctoral degree in astrophysics. PBS, the largest provider of professional development for STEM teachers. This is opening up. So what we got is colleges and universities will be able to adapt to the first phase of the revolution. Internet and mobile devices, they can't adapt to big data, AI, VR, and AR. It's going to produce disruptive change. And I am already, is this true that I'm already over? I'm already over my time? Okay. Let me just bring it to a close and see if there are any questions. So what I'm saying in this talk, demography, economy, technology, they're going to demand change from higher education. For a long time, it's going to be adaptive. Higher education will continue to adapt until it can't adapt anymore, much as the newspaper industry tried to do that, much as the film industry tried to do that. And they created transitional devices like Blockbuster to try to keep them going. We've created OPMs. The question is, will they be the next Blockbusters as we move to an entirely different form of higher ed? So eventually what we're going to find is profound change. And what I'd say is just one more thing, and then I'm really going to stop and say that what I reported to you on today is a book I'm writing. And it has 3 parts. And it says the only way to understand the future is you have to look backward at the shift from agrarian America to industrial America. You have to look forward, taking the technology, the economy, and the demographics and project them forward. And finally, you have to look sideways. Lots of knowledge organizations have been forced to change faster than we have. There are lots of lessons that can be learned by watching them. The way the change occurred last time, during the industrial era, broad criticism, followed by rejection of the criticism by colleges and universities. Don't know who you're talking about. Followed by experimentation on the part of higher education. Followed by some new models, places like Hopkins, Cornell, MIT. Diffusion of the models, mainstream adoption, standardization, because this was like the Wild West. Everybody adopted it differently. And finally, integration. Where we are today is we're somewhere between experimentation and creating new models. Diffusion's a while off. What it means for those of us who are here, if you can dream it, you can probably do it today. There's never been a better climate for experimentation with higher education. And I think I probably have the best room in the country full of people who are going to do that. Thank you all very much.